Hey guys, welcome to week 1 of our Flex class on the Master Painters. We're going to have a really good time for the next 4 weeks. Our first artist that we're going to talk about is Claude Monet, and I'm going to show you some slides that will give you a little bit about his life. So the first slide that you see here is Monet himself, and he is, in this picture, he's got his paintbrush and his palette, and that's him standing there. That's actually a picture of him because they didn't have pictures back then when he was still alive. So in this picture, if this was in color or today's kind of picture, you would see a lot of color behind him because it looks like he's painting some lily pads back there. So when Monet started, he started off with doing caricature drawings. Caricature drawings are drawings where the face or some part of the face is exaggerated for a comic value. Usually it's not mean-spirited, usually it's just a funny thing. So he started doing these caricature drawings to make a living, and he did a lot of them. They're pretty funny. So you'll see the one on the right with a really big nose. That's interesting. And the other one, just exaggerated heads and noses, is pretty much what makes up a caricature drawing. So then he started doing some painting, and when he started doing some painting, he did his more early paintings more realistic. So you'll see in this picture right here of a shoreline with flags, this picture shows more realism style. It's not real, super realism, but more realism than he did later in his work. This piece that you see that shows a city street, maybe from a building, was rejected by the Salon in Paris because the culture of Paris was called the Salon, the art culture of Paris was called the Salon, and they didn't like his artwork because it wasn't realism. It was definitely not your typical art that was in the salon at the time. So he made his people, like in this painting, are very much blobs. They're not normal looking people. So the salon did not like this kind of painting because it wasn't real. It was just what the impression of what he saw, which is actually, in my opinion, a little more real than what you see if they were to draw these people with all the details of eyes, nose, and mouth and all of that. So in this painting right here, it was rejected because they thought they were blobs, when in reality it's a gorgeous painting. The next painting I'm showing you is a sunset picture, and this one he called Impression of Sunset. And this was the first of his paintings to be named something about an impression. And this is where they get the name Impressionist. So the artists that were in his group of artists that were rebelling against the Salon in Paris were called Impressionists. And he was one of the first. And this painting right here was a really good example because it shows the impression of what was there and maybe not what exactly was there to the eye. All that kind of blob stuff in the back, the Paris Salon hated that. And they also hated color. They liked a lot of subdued traditional color, like Renaissance type paintings and things like that. So this colorful painting went against everything they had. So he also liked to paint outside, and as they say in France, it's called in plein air or in the open air. So that was revolutionary also because people didn't paint outside. They just painted from the actual person standing in a studio. It was very orchestrated, meaning that it was very planned out, the typical paintings of the day. So he would just go out and start painting what was there and what was there at the time and whatever the weather was that day. In fact, he painted these 3 pictures of the Parliament at different times of the day in different seasons. So if you see the one on the top left, it's a pretty normal day. The one on the top right is more of a very bright, maybe a sunset type of day. And the one on the bottom with the guys with the oars and the little boats, it's very foggy. So he did the same pictures over and over again, showing different types of day and different types of lighting. So he also did that with some haystacks too. I don't have those pictured here, but that is what he typically did, was take pictures and do them and paint them outside in different settings, different times of day, and different times of the year. He was an avid gardener and loved his garden. So he had a Japanese bridge in his garden, but he also had lily pad pond. And you'll see this lily pad pond. This is in France. And this lily pad pond was a huge inspiration for a lot of his later paintings, as you'll see in a few minutes. This Japanese bridge inside his garden near his lily pad was inspired by him when he went to and visited Japan. He saw the little garden bridges and he really wanted to have one in his garden, so he built one in his garden. And it ended up being, here's another angle of the garden as you see it today. These current pictures are what that garden looks like still today. So we've kept that garden in France very nice and very much in the way he wanted it done. So the two bridge pictures that you see here are currently what they look like. And it looks pretty close to what it did for his paintings over 100 years ago. So his painting on the right, this picture, you'll see his painting on the right, and you'll see the current picture of what the Japanese bridge looks like on the left. And they're pretty close. They've kept the gardens pretty close to what he liked it to be. Here's another picture from a garden on the left is a current picture of the garden that he painted on the right. So there's still very similar look to it. Like I said, the gardens in France are still kept that way. So he also did a lot of lily pad paintings, and you might be more familiar with the lily pad paintings because he did a lot of those, and they're huge. So here's the lily pad, as we saw before, a lily pad pond that was inspiring him. These paintings are really, really big. So if you see this one, it's on the wall. It's got a lot of blue in it. It's lily pads, and it's huge. And it's hard to tell from this picture because there's no one standing in front of it to tell you how big it is. But if you look at this picture with the people in the center of the gallery, you will see how really huge these paintings are. He wanted you to be totally engulfed in his paintings and feel like you were actually there. And so some of these are in the round too, which is a round gallery. So another example is this lady sitting in front of the same one we saw before. You can see how big these paintings really are. I've seen some of these paintings in Chicago many years ago, and they are truly gorgeous and just huge, and they're mind-blowing actually. They're just really, really cool paintings. So Monet was one of the original Impressionists, and he is a loved artist now. At the time when he first started, no one really liked his stuff, and no one really liked any of the Impressionist artists, but people of Paris grew to love them, and they became very famous and very well-loved artists. So now we're going to create our own Monet piece, which is going to be so fun. We're going to do the Japanese bridge, like you saw in the picture, inspired by his own garden with his own Japanese bridge. So we're going to start doing that in just a minute.